It's really all about stepwise motifs in this world, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah, Anton. Yes, it is. Yeah,
If you really boil down like Shore's
yeah,
style, and obviously like the
yeah.
things about your style that make it sound like
Mm.
Shore style, it's
Mm-hmm.
probably like stepwise
Yeah.
melodies and chromatic
Yes.
median harmonies.
Yep. Yep. That's the recipe. Yeah.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to Delving Too Deep, which I guess is the name of this segment now. This time we'll explore the hidden depths of Stephen Gallagher's score for The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. So for context, after the first teaser dropped around Halloween featuring original score, I messaged Stephen eager to discuss the thematic connections to Howard Shore's work. And then fast forward to last Sunday, I finally got to see the movie, and the day after I requested this interview. Just 2 days later, we had our chat. Now, as usual, I know that a lot of people are going to prefer to listen to this instead of watching, so this ding will represent additional information being presented on screen. However, about halfway through the talk, we're going to get into like the real deep stuff, and due to the amount of information, I really recommend watching that. Needless to say, this will include spoilers for the whole movie. Now, finally, I want to recommend some other interviews, because let's face it, there are people with far better equipment, experience, and charisma than me, which makes for far more enjoyable, relaxed, and cohesive interviews. I can promise you some very specific insights and revelations, but if you want a more broad range of topics, discussions, and anecdotes, then check these out. Let's go. This is a bit sudden, I guess, because uh, I can compare, like I interviewed Bear McCreary last year, I think, regarding his Rings of Power score, and when I
Right.
brought it up, he was like, "Yeah, I can probably fit you in a couple of months." Compared to that, it was a lot shorter time to like prepare all my stuff and my notes and stuff like that. So I had to. You have to excuse me if I'm a bit
No
unprepared,
problem.
but
No problem at all.
and might as well do this properly. My name is Anton. Of course, when I message you on Instagram, you will only have seen Monoverantus, which is the name of my channel,
Yeah.
where I do, analysis of, well, mostly Lord of the Rings score, but any kind of soundtracks, really. And
Awesome.
I could just basically take it in chronological steps, basically, that I've dedicated like a couple of years just to analyzing the works of Howard Shore, based on this one, of
Yeah.
course.
Oh, great book. Great book.
A
Yes.
very well reviewed example here. Studied inside and out, and I spent
Amazing.
several years like putting that kind of analysis on the interwebs.
Wow.
And
That's
when that
great.
project was, yeah, and mostly thanks to like the active Lord of the Rings community, so to say. There's a lot of people who's very interested in this stuff, but not necessarily a lot of people who know like the
The
deep
deep.
theory and things like that.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
so that's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of my stuff,
That's excellent.
getting into the nitty gritty. And
Great.
that's why I was so interested when teaser, the first teaser for the Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, appeared that actually had your music in it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And that
Right.
was,
Uh,
yeah, that was the one which included this.
yeah, that's right. And you picked. You. I think you messaged me and you picked it up. And you're like, "Is that Hera's theme?"
Yes,
And I was like, "Yeah. Yes. Yes, it is."
exactly.
Nice work.
And that's exactly the kind of stuff that I'm all about. So that gave me a lot of hope. And now that I finally have seen the movie, like this Sunday, I can finally say that my hopes are warranted, and I'm very
oh,
excited to
cool.
talk and
Oh,
dive deep
great.
into Discord.
Oh,
And
Anton, that's amazing.
yes, but the short amount of preparation I managed to do, I did find other interviews that you have made with, for example, Matt Smythe. Um,
Yeah, Mike Smythe. Yeah, yeah.
and who was like an old friend, a very old friend,
Yeah.
of yours.
What very old friend. Yeah, we went to music school together, so we studied. We were in the studied composition
Yes,
together, and
and he's a
then he
composer as
moved.
well.
He is, yeah, yeah. He lives in LA now, so I don't see him as often as I used to, but it's good to see
Yes,
him.
exactly, and that was a very rewarding little bit of like chatting to study, because you also talked a bit about like the actual work on the themes and the
Yes.
And I got the chance to learn more about it because I actually caught the interview you did like yesterday or something, the One
Yeah,
Ring.net people.
yeah. It's been a week of it.
Yeah, sure. It was kind of crazy for me because, of course, as somebody who is intent of like, going deep, I, of course, felt I had to watch that then. And I was so afraid, oh no, they're going to get to all the questions that I'm going to ask and they're going to like
Oh,
wrap it
there are
up
more
and I'm
questions.
going to be left with nothing. So,
Oh, Anton, no.
and thankfully you didn't. I should say
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
A lot of interesting stuff. And I suppose for the eventual viewers of this, I heavily recommend watching that interview because those two guys are very good. They're
yeah.
charismatic, but they didn't go very deep into the actual themes, and I'm thankful for that because then we can
Excellent.
segueing into the actual topics we're about to discuss about the process. Starting there of getting this score together and entering like Middle Earth itself. You started as a music editor on The Hobbit, correct?
That's right. That's correct. Yes. So
So exactly,
I
tell
back
me
in
about like how that started and how that eventually moved on to you doing like composing stuff as well.
right. Well, working as a music editor on The Hobbit, uh, it was an incredible time. And as a Lord of the Rings fan, I couldn't believe that I was getting to work on the Hobbit trilogy. Um, so the first process that I was involved in was making the temp score. And so, for those who don't know, basically making a temp score or putting a temp score together is you're working to, in my case, you're working to a sort of a rough cut of the film, and we're taking music from pre-existing music from other films and putting it against the images that have been edited together to sort of try and get a sense of what music
Like
might
the
be
intended feel of
a
it,
good
how it's
match.
kind of supposed to
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But and so obviously the material that we were using to build the temp score was 13 hours of existing Lord of the Rings music. That was our first call, and through that, and the first week I started work on that, Doug Adams book actually came out, and I ordered it, and it was this incredible sort of period of just like weeks and weeks of reading through the book, listening to the 13, 14 hours of Howard's incredible music for the Rings trilogy, and then trying to find parts of that would fit the Hobbit. Um, so it was actually like kind of going to school
be. Yeah,
for
indeed.
the first part, and then uh, Peter and Fran asked me to take a shot at writing the Blunt the Knife song for the dwarfs dinner scene, which was a lot of fun.
Can
I
tell from watching
basically,
the behind the scenes from the Hobbit appendices, so
yeah,
to say, where they include like
oh,
your work on the goblin stuff as well, a lot of
oh
different
yeah,
weird kind of percussion and stuff.
yeah. That was a lot of fun. So I just basically had a couple of friends over, and we just singing around the microphone, pretending to be dwarves, and really, yeah, totally loved making the demo. And I sent it off to Peter and Fran. They were happy, and they said, "Yeah, we're going to use it in the film." And I was elated.
Mm.
And then they said, "Well, would you mind teaching the cast and arranging the
Yeah.
recording?" And that was, yeah, to walk into the room for the first rehearsals with the voice cast and just look around at all of the actors, and it's quite intimidating because I was like fans of a lot of their work, and I mean they were so good, they were so lovely. So yeah,
And
it
so
was
basically, you could say that like your work as a music editor kind of led to knowing the people that would notice that you could benefit, or like you had things to offer musically as well.
yeah, I would say that's a fair, yeah, that's a fair thing to say, yeah.
And I
absolutely.
suppose that even carries on to you eventually becoming like the composer for the War of the Rohirrim.
Yeah, Anton, I think so. I had worked with two of the script writers, Phoebe Gittins and Adi Papagiorgio,
Mm.
on one of their early feature films, and so I'd written the score for that. So yeah, we had a pre-existing relationship, and
Which also for
it
my
was
viewers who may not know, the Phoebe Giddens is like the daughter of Philippa Boyens, am I right?
that's correct. Yeah, that's
Yes,
right.
so you can see like the kind of ties together.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it has to be said that this is happening in a country with the population is 5 million people. I live in a city where the population is, I'm gonna say, take a wild stab and say 500,000, but I think that might be overselling it. And if you take a subset of the people who live here and work in film, it's fairly small. So
Yeah, I'm sorry to say I haven't actually watched any of your earlier stuff. Once again, if I had more time to
that's
prepare, I
fine.
might have done so. Not a lot of New Zealandish media on the whole. I got like Flight of Conchords.
Oh, love them. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
sure, they
hometown
good
hometown
representation.
villains. Yeah, no, they're great. Yeah, it's actually wild to watch them. I remember going and seeing their shows in a tiny little theater in Bats, which is called Bats in Wellington. And then the next time I saw them live was like at a massive kind of event center, like that holds hundreds, well, not
Yeah.
hundreds, but thousands of people. It was just like, wow, guys, this is awesome. And they've
So like their
they did their thing
contemporaries
without.
like Taika Waititi as well, becoming like
Mhm.
a humongous director who everybody knows about.
Yeah, that's yeah, no, that's super great. I mean, they we all used to kick around in the theater scene in Wellington in the sort of the early '90s.
Mm.
Um, it's really amazing to see what those guys have achieved. That's brilliant.
And I guess it's like a bit of a like scratch you, scratch me situation because you as well are trying to like keep other musicians working in
Mm.
New Zealand as
Mhm.
well. If I think
Yeah,
about
yeah,
like the
for sure.
orchestra, for example,
Hmm.
you did have very, I don't know if it's unusual. Is it usual to
Mm.
have like so many different sections working together from different parts? Like we have London, Mexico, New Zealand.
Mm.
I don't have like the exact list of which parts were where, but like you basically had to have made almost like the entire score beforehand,
Mm.
I guess, before.
I do get your point, Anton, and you're quite right. We I'm not sure how usual it is to do it this way. I mean, I think striping is fairly usual. So striping is basically just recording section by section. So strings, winds, choir, brass, percussion. Um, we recorded the strings first because we wanted like them to be the sort of foundation of the ensemble. Like
This is Wolf, by the way. Disregard the glass.
oh. No judgment,
Mm.
man. um, uh, we we recorded everything we recorded in New Zealand. We recorded at a place called Stella Maris, which is an old sort of like an old nunnery, really. This little chapel on the hill in Seatoon, overlooking the Wellington Harbour. It's a very pretty place. And Peter and Fran have bought this place and sort of um, earthquake strengthened it and put in a control room and it's not a huge room, but we found ways to lay out the strings in different sort of formations that gave us a pleasing sort of width and depth of sound. um, we didn't have the resources of the original trilogy in terms of both in terms of space to record, player numbers, and budget. um, so we had to be quite inventive and quite well planned as to how we were going to do this.
Exactly, because as you mentioned in your talk with the One Ring guys,
Mm.
for example, like the entire collection of very unusual woodwinds, like the Sean and
Yes,
Crown horns and the
yes,
Roush
yes.
for example, there was
Yeah.
like not a lot of time to like experiment with it. I suppose they had to get there, and you have to get something good out of
Yeah.
it pretty quickly.
We did have a modicum of room to experiment, and that was sort of necessary because primarily working with sampled crumhorns and working with like sampled Rauschweif and shams, you get a sense of the instrument, you get a sense of a certain thing the instrument can do. But when you're in the room with with Jude and Dr. Emily, they're such incredible players and they're so generous and so fast. Whatever sort of score is in front of them, they're instantly saying, well, we can do it this way, we can do it this way, we can swap instruments, we can retune, or we can do this. They're just offering things, and it's so generous, but also makes the process so interesting because immediately you get an idea of what these instruments and what these players are capable of, and you just never get that from a sampled sampled instrument. And we didn't, you're right, we didn't have a huge amount of time, but we had enough time to record what we needed. We did 2 sessions with them, and it was yeah, it was like a learning curve for me because I'd never really worked with those instruments before. And having players like Emily and Jude, they they were so patient, and they really helped us sort of hone in on the characteristics of those specialist winds that would be most kind of interesting, most a good fit with the score.
Sure. And also, it's a bit of a hot topic among composing people that a lot of modern scores may just not disregard the woodwind section all entirely. So it's good to see some people not only championing it, but also like trying to expand it.
I have to say, Anton, we're blessed with like the wind section that we worked with um, from the ensemble Stroma. Stroma and most of the players in Stroma play also in the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Stroma was an ensemble set up by two gentlemen, Michael Norris and Hamish McKeach, to play or concentrate on contemporary chamber music, performing contemporary sort of chamber music in primarily in Wellington. And like I go to most of their concerts, and it's the sort of music I love, and to hear it played live by such incredible musicians is always like a real thrill. So for me to have them on the score was really huge. And the wind section are so good. They're so good, and listening to them play in that room, they're just like I just the level of musicianship and just the sound of the wind ensemble. It's like so great, so good, and then to take that sort of those recordings to London to record the brass and have the brass players sort of comment saying, "Who are the wind section? They're amazing." It's just like
Exactly.
yes, they are.
Have some beneficial rivalry then. Let's check out
Oh.
this trumpet solo.
Yeah, no, take out this trumpet solo. Take
Because
this.
sure is a lot
So
of
yeah,
trumpet in this movie.
there's a lot of trumpet in this movie. Yeah, we had some great trumpet players. We recorded all the brass in London, and a lot of the people playing in the brass sessions had also played on the original trilogy
Hmm?
sessions, which was wonderful. A little intimidating.
Yeah, of course. Because, exactly like the stuff when I had the chance to talk with Bear McCreary, of course, a lot of like the layman's uh, way of thinking about it would probably be something like, how on earth are you going to be able to carve out your own space, so to say, in the
Yeah,
shadow of Howard Shore? Because,
yeah,
some people might just be happy to have like the exact same stuff again and again and again. If they could keep
yeah,
Howard Shore alive for like the rest of eternity and keep him churning out more Lord of the Rings score, then a lot of people
yeah.
would be happy. But I imagine that to both you and of course Bear McCreary and other people who have had the chance to work like in in the Lord of the Rings mythopoeia since our short, they will of course still have like their own interest, their own voice, so to say, and they have to walk that kind of balance.
Anton, absolutely 100% agree. I would also add to that that, I'm assuming in Bear's case and my case, we're looking at sort of different, not different worlds, but sort of different stories. And those stories demand different approaches, and they demand well, what they're presenting to you, is different from the trilogy. So in our case, obviously being an anime, that's a pretty major difference from live action. So the information that we're being presented with on screen is different, and the way that characters interact, camera moves, and also individual directors choose to tell the story. Those parts of what you're working on demand an approach that sort of is different from the original trilogy. And and I would say the same for Bear's work as well. I mean, his music is amazing, right? But the Rings of Power is very different.
Obvious difference, of course, being that he did not have access to like the New Line Cinema, Warner Brothers collection of copyrighted stuff.
Yes,
but you can still tell that he is well aware that like the average person thinking of like dwarf music thinks of like low male choir. The stuff that Howard Shore like put in like the new standard, so to say, is still alive well.
Yes. I like that you said the new standard. That's kind of how I thought about it when I was working.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I also remember from like the One Ring interview, you mentioned, for example, Hans Zimmer's score for Dune. And you actually threw that out there. Do you have an example of like a movie where listening to the score in isolation didn't really work, like didn't jive with you, but watching it with the movie was like a light bulb moment?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I gotta admit that I had a bit of that experience with your score.
Oh, cool.
Yes, and not entirely. I'm not gonna like shoot it down in any way, because I did.
Sure.
The moment like I heard Héra's theme, I was like, "Ooh, this is really interesting." I'm really excited to see what this is gonna be like. But like listening on the album in itself, like didn't immediately make you go, "Wow!" I thought like this sounds like it sounds right, at least like it sounds fitting. But it was just sorry, really.
No, that's all good, man. I appreciate that.
But like the thing, when I finally watched the movie, I think that's when it clicked, because of course you worked on the Hobbit movie, so I'm not going to try to shit talk into it anyway. But I will say that the thing that I like the least about them is that they kind of try to compete with the Lord of the Rings in like grandeur. They try to be as big and as bold, and that doesn't really jive with my idea of like the Hobbit as like a children's story. Like it's not supposed to be that like epic. And I think this movie is kind of exactly what I really wish people would do. They would know exactly the level, the scale that this story requires, and that goes for the music as well.
Oh, thank you. I think that's a really brilliant thing to say. And yeah, this film, it's interesting sometimes looking back onto the Hobbit film as an editor, when we did take some of those Lord of the Rings cues and make a temp score with them. It just, even though you're in Middle Earth and it's a very similar kind of look, camera moves, cinematography, it felt like taking a suit or a series of clothes that had been tailor-made for somebody and putting them on somebody else who wasn't the same height or shape. It felt, and that's when when I temped Mark Wilshire, the producer, and I temped this film, we had the same thing. We used, Lord of the Rings is obviously the first thing we're going to reach for to sort of like put a temp score together. But there were lots of places where it felt just as great as the music was for Lord of the Rings, it just didn't fit what we were seeing in Kenji Kamiyama's animation. It just didn't quite gel.
Mm.
So look, I'm really glad that you made that observation. Isn't like sometimes you listen to a record and you're like, yeah, but when you see the way the film operates in visual terms, it hopefully makes.
Well, if we're gonna actually move into like the actual nitty gritty,
Yeah.
then of course we have themes returning. Obviously, the Rohan fanfare,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I suppose the so-called History of the Ring theme,
Yes.
which only appears once in like the actual movie, and that would be like part of the title screen. Kind of feels
Yes.
almost like it's like an obligation, like it is tied to the Lord of the Rings. Therefore, you gotta have the ring theme, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it did appear in the album as well. So would you mind talking a bit about like why it was there and why it was also removed from the movie?
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Well, initially we recorded the History of the Ring theme in the sequence where you see the orcs, and the orcs are sort of like talking about the rings, and one of them opens up a pouch that's full of rings. We put the ring theme over that sequence, and it sort of felt okay.
Mm.
And but the more we sort of progressed down the road, and the more that we saw the story and the animation come together, it felt there was a point where we were like, this doesn't feel quite right being here. It feels a little forced.
Yeah.
So we took it out of that part of the film,
Mm.
but we truly wanted the beginning of the film to feel like you're back in Middle Earth, and it's in the lineage of the original trilogy. And I mean, I just remember watching those films for the first time, and every time the ring theme came in at the title, you were like, "Oh my goodness, here we go." That's um,
Yeah, but I appreciate that point. That like there are, of course, other kinds of callbacks in the actual movie, like pieces of
yeah,
dialogue and scenes and stuff that they're still gonna make sure you remember like the original trilogy. But of course, there are also moments where it can be a bit forced, just like you say. So
yeah.
I'm not sure if I would have felt like it was too much in the movie, but it's a good point.
Uh, I think in the film at first we were like, no, this feels good, but there was a point after everything had sort of been mixed, and the visuals were in a much better place when we sort of watched the film through, multiple times, and each time when we got to that space, we thought it just doesn't feels like it takes us out of the film rather than pulls us in. But at the same time, Anton, we wanted to release the album that contained everything we recorded. So just
Yes.
put everything out there, and just because I'm, as a fan, I appreciated when the complete recordings came out. I did want to hear everything.
Exactly.
And
And
yeah,
we're still waiting for it for the Hobbit movies.
yeah,
It's been
I know.
many, many years. Who
Many
knows?
years. We'll see what we can do. I'll have a word to them.
And speaking of the same kind of case, we also have like the Goner theme making a kind of surprise appearance in the album
Yes,
when we reach
yes,
Isengard. And
that's correct.
obviously, at this point, Isengard doesn't have anything to do with like the Isengard theme. So,
No,
can you tell me about like the thought process there?
of course, absolutely. So initially we recorded. Well, initially there was a sequence that was now appears differently in the film. It was recut, but the way when Hera is kidnapped, she wakes up in the tower, or in a guard tower, and pulls back the curtain. What we used to see was this imposing sort of camera pan down of Orthanc.
Hmm.
Um, and for that version, we thought, well, it's sort of the way that it was shot sort of demanded like a musical statement.
Hmm.
And it's obviously long before Saruman has sort of come under the auspices of the Dark Lord. So what kind of statement could we make there that feels like we're acknowledging Orthanc and its current sort of context, its current environment? And the Gondor themes seem to be the one that made sense, because in a way Orthanc was still sort of was tied up with Gondor at that point. And we sort of asked Philippa Boyens, we're like, we feel like it needs to be some sort of thematic idea here that calls back to this place. And it was her that suggested the Gondor theme. And we recorded it, and then the scene got recut.
Yeah.
And then as happens, it happens. And then that iteration of the Gondor theme just did not really feel correct in the cut. So, but we loved the arrangement of it.
And I understand as well, like lore nerds like me and you will of course appreciate like the nod to the fact that that's like old Numenorean architecture and like part of Gondor.
Yeah.
But even if you have watched like all the movies from like this one through The Hobbit up to Lord of the Rings, that will never pay off musically. So I can also see like the point of not using it.
Yeah, no, in the end, again, it felt sort of didn't really fit in the film. For that edit, I thought it was really cool, but the new cut, which I think is probably a better cut, just it felt like trying to superimpose something that shouldn't be there.
And then at last, speaking of like the old established themes, will also, of course, I would be remiss not to mention the nature's reclamation theme that appears towards the end, or simply the nature theme, which it is credited as in like the album liner notes. And that's an interesting choice. Like people like me think that's an interesting choice, and I think you might understand why.
Yeah, I think you've got a good point. So I think probably our choice was,
like, spoilers for my viewers, by the way, there's a hint towards Gandalf, and we hear like the nature theme as a hint there.
Yeah. The Gandalf theme, I mean, I think of the Gandalf theme that briefly appears in the first Hobbit film, right? When they're having that conversation where yeah. I kind of thought the nature theme would work because in the Lord of the Rings, it's essentially tied up with Gandalf, and in the points where he's sort of sending out
The moth.
I don't know, like the moth, just like sending out a missive or a message or something like that. He's reaching out to other people, other beings, and the fact that we don't see him, we see as sort of like a card. I just thought it might actually be kind of nice to sort of to use the nature theme, like Gandalf sort of reaching out to here. It's sort of well, I agree. We did have a conversation about which theme to use,
because one of the things I immediately thought about when I heard that was like, perhaps there's like a priority for Lord of the Rings themes instead of the Hobbit themes, for example. Maybe we expect people to have like Lord of the Rings and they will not recognize Gandalf's theme. But then I remember that you, if anybody knows like the Hobbit, why would you consider that a lower priority like than the Lord of the Rings?
It sort of didn't. It wasn't kind of about priority. It just felt in the guise, because we don't see Gandalf and we don't, and the music plays like there's kind of, if you look at the scene, right, she's got she's received a message from someone, we don't know, it's unnamed, and then Owen says, "Oh, and does this wizard have a name?" And Héra says he has many. And then she pulls out the card, and it's on the card we hear the theme. So it's like kind of on to something that sort of didn't go, "It's Gandalf," before before she said Gandalf. It was kind of like a hint, and also the nature theme again. That idea of Gandalf asking for or reaching out, not in person, sort of reaching out via moth, via messenger.
It's a bit of an interesting subject because are you aware of the old website A Magpie's Nest, which cataloged like, the different themes and lyrics in the movies before this one existed?
No, is that no? Where do I find this?
Sorry, it's defunct now.
Oh,
And one of the most like enduring alternative analysis of this score that's not come from Doug Adams is possibly her idea that the nature theme might be a bit of a misnomer, and that like a better name
yeah.
for it might be like help unlooked for.
That's
like a quote from Tolkien, something
really like
help
that.
unlooked for is because you can see there are some times in like the trilogy where like calling it the nature theme might be a bit of a stretch. Like Rohan appearing at like the Battle of Pelennor Fields, for example. You can say something like, "Oh, they have gotten like the spirit of nature and they are horse people," or something. But it kind of works better to think of it like, "Oh, here's the help that came unlooked for."
Yeah, that's a nice. I love that. Yeah,
And that works also perfectly with like your quotation in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I guess help was. Yeah, that works totally. I mean, you're right. I'd forgotten about the Pelennor Fields. It's such an amazing sequence too, isn't it? When the nature theme comes in.
But that's obviously also a part of like an issue that music editors actually introduced, because if you listen to like the complete recordings of A Lord of the Rings, you have like the Gandalf the White theme that's supposed to arrive in like the climax of the Two Towers, foreshadowing his arrival, which was switched out with the nature theme in like the final edit. So it wasn't like Howard Shore's original idea to give it that function.
Yeah.
And so it kind of just leaned into it in like the third movie, I believe.
Yes, I agree.
So now we have like a sort of connective tissue throughout all these movies.
I love that.
Yeah, that's true. But and I think you mentioned this on the One Ring interview as well. If you were tempted to like do your own spin on some of Shore's themes, like your your own variation of a Rohan fanfare or something like that.
I did. I mean, I was tempted, but ultimately, I still feel like certainly we wanted those things to sort of stand alone, and we wanted Howard's music to sort of be respected, and especially in the beginning of the film where you have History of the Ring, the Rohan theme. We wanted those to be sort of the doorway back into Middle Earth, the sort of the welcoming beacons. So welcome back to Middle Earth. I the further we go into the film, it just was like those themes they stand alone, and I had so much music to write. I mean, if we take all of the Howard themes that we used in the film and put them like back to back in linear order, it's like between 4 and maybe 5 minutes of music. It's 2 hours of music in the film, and I felt like the Howard stuff should be like the supporting the like the architecture that still remains in it, and I was sort of like building an extension onto the front of the house of that, if that makes it.
One of the reasons I asked that is because, as we both know, Howard himself made such malleable themes that are very.
This is a good point.
Yes, but like the Rohan fanfare, for example, in its usual guise being the minor third, gets that transformation in like the third movie where it moves up to a perfect fourth. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that kind of like tickles the imagination to imagine like an even earlier version of a Rowan fanfare where it's only like a second. Something like that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess that would be like, perhaps if you like did a movie about like the origin of Rohan, you could have something like that. Like, oh, here
That
was like
then
the first seed of Rohan before it had developed, but perhaps not in this
no, but I think I like what you're talking about in terms of like evolution
movie.
of musical ideas. I think that would be really cool. In a Rohan like origin story, I think that would be amazing. That would be very, very, very cool.
And not least because that's one of the cool stuff. I remember specifically when you talked with Matt Smythe was discussing like Wolf's theme, or like, shall I even,
Yes.
is it appropriate to call it Wolf's theme? Because we have to remember that um, Howard, or at least Doug's version of like Howard's ethos, so to say, is like scoring cultures, not necessarily characters. Like,
Yeah.
sure, you could say, oh, that's Frodo's theme. But in another scene, oh, that's Sam's theme. But in another scene,
Yeah.
it's Bilbo's theme. And it makes more
Yeah.
sense just to put the Shire theme because they all
Yeah.
connected
Yeah.
through this
I
world.
agree.
And the same goes with the
It's
Rohan theme as well. Like, it's not
yeah.
just Theoden and
Yeah.
Sabine or Eomer's theme.
No, it's the cultural. No, I agree. I think that's a really good point. Yeah, Wolf's theme actually is kind of a Dunlending sort of theme because the very first time we hear it, yeah, that's
G
it.
minor to
That's it.
E minor. Mostly used for Freck guy in like that first scene with
Yes,
Rita.
yes, absolutely. So basically, that is when we first hear that theme. It's when Freka enters at Medicel's. You know, you've I see you've started without me. He walks in with Lord
Very
Wolf.
imposing stature.
Yes, he is very imposing, and General Targ. They walk in. That's the first time you hear that theme, and it's really it's the Dunlending culture, uh, but primarily it's this theme of these Fricker and Wolf, supported by Targ, have come as essentially as usurpers, um, and the theme is kind of it, is it malevolent? It's uneasy,
Sure.
and the coloristic. That's when we introduce the coloristics. The coloristic character of like the sort of specialist winds.
Like the Shawm and the Crumhorn.
With the Shom, the Crumhorn, and the Rush. Well, the Rush fight doesn't come in there, but the idea of these kind of this wind color.
Did you ever have a point where you thought like, oh, I love working with this instrument. I kind of regret just using it for this culture. I kind of wanted to use it in other places as well.
Yes, yeah. Well, once I heard especially the Rush five, in its more extreme tones, was like, oh, we should use this everywhere. This is extreme. This is incredible. Um, uh, but I think what you're saying about scoring a culture or a characteristic of a place or a characteristic of a person or a group of people is yeah
You've tried to
that's
apply that as well.
yeah, I have. I mean, invariably these things get called, Hera's theme or this or that, but really the genesis of them has come from. I don't really want to score a person. The genesis of these things is like, well, what's a characteristic they have? Um, what's the cultural context that they have come out of or are operating in? And what is the journey that they undertake, and what does that journey require from a musical standpoint, and what's the intent of the music? And largely that's coming from the director's vision of what the story is.
And in the case of especially Wolf's theme, then if we're allowed to call it that,
Yeah, we
I
can
think
call it
I think it is warranted, not least because you can see that the evolution of this theme is inherently tied
yeah.
to Wolf as a character. Because,
Yes.
as we said, like the original version,
Mm-hmm.
G minor to E minor with
Mhm.
still chromatic medians, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you get that sense of unease from like both the B flat and the B natural.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
the moment Freka dies, and we start
Yes,
to
it
get,
changes.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
moving it
Yeah.
to like a G minor to E flat minor. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
Which
Yeah.
of course many people will recognize from all sorts of movies and concerts,
That's
like
it. Yeah.
the Ultimate Evil collection. If we're talking
Yes.
like
Absolutely.
butchering this,
Yeah. No, 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 no. No, no, that's yeah. That's
or for
100%.
example, like the Pity of Gollum. You know, all sorts of
Yes.
wonderful stuff being
Yes.
derived from this, and you can say that Wolf's like his perspective is inherently like tied to like what direction this motif goes.
Hmm.
With those
That's correct.
starting for notes, and you're like, where do we go now?
Where do we go
And
from there? Exactly. Yeah.
early in the movie, we have so many good examples of this, like that flashback scene where you see like the one time in Wolf's life
Mhm.
where he was like at least somewhat innocent, you know. And we just
Yes.
get like, ah,
Yeah. Yeah.
lovely,
Yeah.
diatonic.
Exactly. Yes. Nice.
Like, oh, it's like a childhood memory.
Yes. I can't. Anton, I love that you've. This is amazing. Thank
That's
you.
it.
Yeah. All of
This is
this.
the stuff. This is what it's all about. Okay. And then
Oh man, I love it.
eventually, like the version we get to hear the most when he really um turns into like the warlord, you know, like
Yeah.
beyond all redemption. You know, really reaching out, like I'm gonna grab it all. I'm gonna seize power.
That's it. Yeah. And it feels more exactly that thing. I'm going to seize power and I'm close to victory and nothing will stop me. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like the like that's exactly like what I'm thinking about when we're talking about like the evolution of themes. It's perfectly within like the frame of mind, like when you're talking about like Howard Shore and how he would develop like the Rohan fanfare from like a third to a fourth, for example,
Yeah.
giving
Yeah.
like a motif a space to like evolve and tell the story through the music.
Oh, sorry, Anton. The one I'm so blown away that you noted all of that. That's really great, man.
Like I'm telling you, it felt kind of like an insult earlier to say that like I wasn't immediately moved by the score, but this one
Oh no.
grows on me. Like every
Oh,
day
cool.
I sit by the piano and listen and like, is that something? Is that another theme?
Love this, Anton. This is amazing, man.
I still haven't figured that one out. Okay. I was like,
Okay,
perhaps this is
well,
Owen's theme or something. Uh,
oh, the minor third sort of.
yeah, exactly.
It's the Shieldmaidens. It's the Shieldmaidens thing. It's
Okay, then it kind of makes sense. Like I thought there was some kind of connection, like because
mm,
since Owen is like a previous or like ex Shieldmaid.
yeah. It was the idea of the Shieldmaiden. Yeah.
Very subtle
Yeah.
indeed. Like I did, I
Yeah.
don't know how many times I went through the score before I even noticed that. Like
Uh,
it's, and that's what I mean about like
yeah.
rewarding repeat listenings, because
Yeah.
obviously if it's like a theme supposed to be relevant to like this dead culture, or like I'm not
Mm,
sure if
mm,
that's
mm.
a fair way to say it, but like something of the past, something that not everybody knows about, then it's entirely appropriate to
Oh,
make it subtle.
100%. Yeah, totally. That's it. And I wanted to thread it through the film because the Shieldmaidens are the kind of a story. It's like a concept, or it's almost like not quite a ghost story, but in the sense that, or urban myth, or um, and I wanted that to have a presence through the story, but I didn't want it to be, as you say, um, prominent or strident in any
We have themes for that and all that.
yeah, that's
I was immediately like I was compelled to call that just like the Helm's theme,
yeah,
because of how central it is to him. But once again,
yeah,
it's more
Yeah.
appropriate to talk about these like cultures. Like Half
Mhm.
gets hit several times.
Yes, yes,
Shots of Meduseld and Edoras also gets it as well. So once again, like this perfect fifth
Mhm.
and minus sixth. Can you walk through me like the
Yes.
idea?
Well, this one was basically I wanted to imbue this. This really, I mean, it's kind of it's called Helm's theme, but it's really sort of Helm's.
Lineage, something. His rule, his
Yeah,
reign.
yeah, his rule, yeah, his reign, and his sort of his reign, his it. I wanted the perfect fifth because it ties into Héra or the headstrong theme, and I wanted that kind of relationship between the two of them. But it the perfect fifth is very kind of like it's very sort of superhero-y kind of. But then the sixth after that is a little, to me anyway, suggests that there might be something a little more fragile behind this mask of power, this
Yeah.
mask of the warrior. So it was just it was my attempt to imbue her the power, just sort of have a little kind of under sketching of not fragility, if that makes sense.
Yeah, surely, because obviously, like the perfect fifth is so like
Yeah,
it's everywhere, so you can't.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard to
yeah,
make like the perfect fifth an own cultural statement. Like, sure, did try, like both
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
but obviously that's nowhere near the only place where a perfect fifth appears. It's like in the
exactly.
dwarves, and it's obviously also with
Yeah,
Éowyn. And
yes, yeah. Well, yes, of course, yes. Hmm.
lots of fifths right
Yeah,
here. And that was,
yeah,
of course, like the
absolutely.
first hint that Hera's theme actually was Hera's theme because of like
Yes,
this
yes,
idea of a lineage.
yes. I love this. That's so great.
I'm not sure if I actually
Yeah,
worked
there
out all
is.
the harmony yet, but something like that.
It's close.
So we have like, as you said, like the
Yeah.
sort of uh, the idea of like an inherent tie between like Helm and his arsenal of the
Yes.
music, and of course
Yes.
Hera, which I
Yes.
guess is like the closest to an actual character theme in this movie, because as we know,
Yes.
Howard Shore
Yeah.
also had some like exceptions, like Éowyn, for example. Like
Elwyn, yeah, totally.
Éowyn is a kind of interesting case because she gets several different themes. like
Yeah.
uh, when most
Yes.
people don't even get one, like they get bunched in with their whole culture, she alone gets
She's
several.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess that was intentional, right? You like did
Yes.
specifically think of like, Éowyn, how can I work with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it was taking Elwyn as an ancestor. Well, Hera is an ancestor of Elwyn.
Hmm.
So I wanted a theme that would place Hera in the context of Rohan
Hmm.
musically, but also that you could line up and see her direct lineage to Eowyn.
Are you
Um,
aware of the so-called like? I'm not sure if Doug Adams ever used the phrase proto Éowyn theme that appears like once in the Two Towers. The first time we meet her, when she like he says that like before like the entire idea of like this
yeah,
had been developed, he did use like the same like chord movement, but with this kind of rising phrase.
yeah. I know that. That's a proto Eowyn thing.
Yes.
Wow,
I'm not sure if he actually used
wow.
exactly those words, but he did like specifically tie it to her. The first time we see here, like before, she has like a real role to play, so to say,
Right.
and
So
that
she, yeah,
is
okay.
curiously similar to this kind of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure.
It's
How do you best call it? Like say free note motifs or something, stepwise motifs.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Uh, it feels yeah. And I wanted the theme for Hera to feel like it was part of this part of this world, so that the DNA could sort of like line up.
I mean, the obvious other example would, of course, be also a theme that uses a lot of those.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of places where you almost get like see if we have something like it's almost exactly like the
Yes. Yeah.
Was
yes,
that also like kind of intentional, like having a sort of like a sense of fellowship carrying her?
Yeah, it was because it was a hint to it. I didn't want to make it overt, but I wanted her theme to carry the I don't know, when I hear that theme that is such joyous, buoyant music, and I kind of wanted an element of that in her theme. But primarily, it was to serve her character in the film, to put her in the cultural context of Rohan and the lineage of Éowyn. Those are the three most important aspects to her musical language, if that makes sense. So
yeah, of course, and that's also what makes it kind of interesting, because as we were talking about Howard Shore and his style of very malleable kind of themes, of course, the way he can also like take one idea from one theme and like pair it with another theme. Like, for example, with like the Gondor theme with like the old kind of standard guys. You know, descending.
Yeah.
And then pairing up with Aragorn's theme in the end.
Yeah.
Something like that.
No, but you're right. It's like it is malleable stuff, and to be able to use something like the Rohan theme and then morph into, at the beginning of the film, to morph into, say, Héra's theme or the Headstrong theme.
And not least like Héra's theme and like Helm's theme. Like after that initial like motif, like the stable motif, like the head of the motif. It's not far off from like.
That's it.
Like it's almost like they converge on like a similar trajectory.
That's correct. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And then the entire thing starts off with that minor third. I mean, once we have the history of the ring theme, we have that sort of minor third melody in C minor that starts the overture off, and that theme is it's like the father-daughter theme. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the one.
It's really all about stepwise motifs in this world, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah, Anton. Yes, it is. Yeah.
If you really boil down like Shore's style, and obviously like the things about your style that make it sound like Shore's style, it's probably like stepwise melodies and chromatic gradient harmonies.
Yep, yep. That's the recipe. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can do so much with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, like I think that's like the shortest clue to why like I even like immediately reacted to, for example, Héra's theme was because of those and all that. But I'm also kind of, just hear me out. Can you almost call those like almost like a theme of their own, so to say? Because of course
I think so.
I really thought I was getting crazy for a moment. Like I started writing down at a time I heard like Héra's theme and Helm's theme, and then I had those moments where it's just like this is like its own theme of its own by this point.
Yeah, that's right. So that sort of that theme is it's almost like, to me, that's like connective sort of tissue, really. It's like it's the sort of speaks about the will of doing. It's kind of like an inaction, like enacting positive things, if that makes sense. facing down danger and facing down darker times and moving through in a decisive way. That's part of what that theme sort of.
And of course, it's the part that almost closest to like the original Fellowship.
Yeah, that's right.
So like the idea of like driving forward, attempting to right the wrongs in the world, or something like that.
Exactly.
Being a connected tissue, even though it's like not an active statement of a Fellowship.
That's right. That's right.
And of course, like it's not like Howard Shore was like dead set on making just a perfect checklist of like this theme can only play when those characters are on screen, something like
100%, 100%. Yeah, that's exactly, because often when you write these things, they tend to take a life of their own. There's you can write a theme, or you can write a musical idea and sort of play around with it and have an idea of what it can do and where it can go. But often I've found after doing that, way further down in the writing process, the themes would sort of go in places where, you know, it just felt natural to do it, but it wasn't something that I kind of foresaw when I first created the theme, if that makes sense. That they sort of.
I'm actually very happy to hear that, because that speaks to like the creative spark being there. Like you're not just supposed to make like a checklist of everything is supposed to fit 100%. Perfectly with like would Shore do this? I don't think so. Like at some point.
It's exactly, Anton, 100%. It has to speak to the truth of the film and the story that you know that we were working on. So there are places where things things went in a direction I was like, oh, okay, that feels true to the film, but not something that I would have thought when I made it. But it feels true to what we see unfolding in front of us and the story that's being told.
And speaking of those actual like quotations, it was interesting to note like the scene with like are we supposed to call them all watchers in the water, or are we supposed to think that that's the watch in the water that appears in the Fellowship? I'm not sure, but like the watcher, you get my meaning.
Yeah, the watch. I mean, I thought it was a different one. I thought simply because General Tigh comes in and says at the end, he says, a watcher in the water.
Yeah.
Rather than the watcher in the water. It's like
it's kind of interesting to like that's like the name of their species or something by this point.
Yeah.
But regardless, of course, like that's not an actual quotation of a Shore theme. It's just like imitating that sort of aleatoric writing instead of
exactly. That's correct. That's 100% correct. So it's not a quotation, but it is utilizing the same technique to generate the material.
And this one is so open that I'm not even sure if it is an intentional quotation at any point.
That's
like
okay.
Háma's song, for example.
Yeah.
Like that's some very interesting choice of first interval, so to say.
It is, yes. Yeah, it is. It really is. I didn't write that song. Yeah,
right.
Phoebe Gittins wrote it, and she brought it in, and we were like, "Oh, I love this. This is great."
Yeah.
This is
That was one of the other questions like left on another page right here about to what degree you were involved in like the different songs, because I understand that. For example, the Paris Paloma, the Rider, for example, you were not involved at all in that one, right?
No, that's correct. I was not involved in that. And the other song, the Háma song, I was working with Phoebe. Phoebe had written it, and I just arranged it for the opening. But I did use that theme throughout the film to sort of like, I guess, to sort of play with Háma, to basically, whether he's alive or whether he's dead, that theme kind of carries on. His presence is sort of is there throughout the film.
And of course, like it's not all about like I tend to talk a lot about like intervals and chords and stuff, but once again, it's all about like he has a harp, of course. Just
exactly.
For example, like I'm gonna go along with Cliff in like the one.
Oh yeah.
discussion that probably was like the standout like some moment, just like the
Oh,
heaviness of the scene. Like Háma is
yeah,
just a standout character. Like if we're talking like
yeah,
writing that feels Tolkienian, even though it's just entirely made up, I suppose. Like we know that he was supposed to die, but all
yeah,
those
yeah,
details like about the old horse and how he doesn't want to like rush it to the death and so on. You still just those first two. Ah, that's
yeah. So
heart
lovely,
wrenching.
right? Yeah.
And of course, like the repeating detail of like those little harp, just harp plucks appearing at the
Mhm.
right moments.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
subtle
No.
and very effective.
Cool. I'm glad you liked that. That was really, yeah. I loved doing it. I thought Háma is a great character, and
And it's also like, why not use the fact that someone actually uses an instrument in a movie? Like, why not
yeah,
include that in
yeah,
some way in
totally.
like this movie? Were you involved in like any of the other promotional material? Like, of course, like there are several different like Rohan fanfare remixes or like
Yeah, no, those were cool. I no, I wasn't involved in those. I don't think we.
they didn't sound particularly much like the actual score, so I'm not surprised.
No, I mean, they were exciting. I just, I we weren't asked, and even if we were, we probably would have said thank you, but we're busy trying to finish the score
Yeah.
for the
And I
film.
suppose that goes
So
also for that like San Diego Comic Con. Or was it Comic Con? There was like a earlier showcase where some people reported, oh, there's the Rohan fanfare, and some people took that to mean that, oh, there's new Rohan fanfares composed for this movie. But I suppose
that's
that
right.
would be tracked from the Lord of the Rings, right?
Uh, if it was the one at Annecy, no, that was actually our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it was our stuff in if we're talking about way back in 2023. That was a demo that I'd made. Um, it was a mock-up essentially.
Hmm. Okay,
We hadn't recorded anything yet, so yeah, I believe that's what was played.
sure. And for example, the Lament for Helm. If you just look on the Spotify list, you see Lorraine Ashburn who like performs it, but like were you involved in like making it?
We we were that having the lament in there in the film was something that Philippa really wanted, and Lorraine seemed like the right fit for the person to perform it.
Hmm?
Um, we no, I mean I had the privilege of being in the studio when Lorraine recorded it, and my only part in it was just to watch and feel myself tear up as she was singing to the mic.
Because that's also interesting because it's not an exact copy of what we hear in the Two Towers. Like
No,
they have changed some lyrics, and
yes,
I'm not an expert on Old English, so I can't really tell
right,
exactly
right,
what some.
yeah,
Do you think some lyrics for that will eventually emerge?
yes, 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 yep, they will. Yeah, no, I loved Lorraine's performance. I really
Yeah,
did.
chilling. Let's see. I think we have actually managed to keep this rather well on time.
Anton, you're the
Since you
man.
said
Thank
that's
you.
like a quarter past. Oh no, yes, I have one last. This is
Yes,
really heavy
sir.
scratchy stuff. Um,
Great.
could be or could not be an intentional thing. Saruman's appearance.
Ah,
That's surprisingly similar to another theme with the
yes,
exact same
yes,
pitches, except kind
yes,
of backwards.
yeah,
Is that intentional?
yes, yes. Nicely
Yeah,
spot on.
of course. Like,
You're the
of course,
first
this
person to. Nice one,
we
man.
live
Very good.
deep,
I
deep
my
geekdom here.
I doff my cap to you, sir. You are yeah, you are next level. That is very nice. Very nice.
Because
Very
obviously
impressive.
that's like Easter eggs entirely for people like me, like the average audience. Even if like they have listened they're like the original scores like 1,000 times a day. Like they're still not gonna pick out something that changed in so many
that's
different ways.
you are. That is very impressive. I'm very very happy to hear you say this.
But I should also point out that I actually think that it's kind of like a better sort of foreshadowing than the one they did in the Hobbit movie, because like when Saruman first appears in the Hobbit movie, they had that little,
Yeah, yeah,
and I kind of think like that spoils it a bit too early. I would have been fine with something more along your approach of making something, you know, interesting with it, but not something that immediately tells you, "Oh, this is going to be a bad guy."
yeah. Absolutely. Well, in this, when we meet him in this film, you know, he's yet to be corrupted. Really, he's yet to be fully corrupted. So we wanted something that didn't that gave you a nod and a wink, but didn't sort of hit you over the head with like, oh, he's a bad guy. So we wanted to make his character a little more light. Yeah, we wanted to sort of give it a melodic acknowledgement that he's a good guy, he's a good wizard. But in the DNA of that melody, if you flip it around, yeah,
It's kind of like the idea of like their fatal flaw. Like he would eventually turn into the
yes,
kind of
yes,
character,
yes,
basically no matter
yeah,
what would have happened, because he is
100,
susceptible to
100%.
certain things as a person.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Nice.
So
Very,
that's
very hats off, sir. Very
and
nice.
hats off to that hint, because that's like exactly kind of the lovely stuff to like chew down.
Thank you.
And I think like I don't have no reason to like keep this going for any other like.
Yeah,
Oh yes, I should. I should
yeah.
as a closing question, since as we mentioned, like I haven't actually had the chance to like delve deeper into your work. What would be like if you had something from your previous catalog or movies or shorts or something like that that you actually would like people to like be aware of? What would you pick?
Uh, there's a collection of short film pieces that I put out. Was it last year or this year? I don't remember. Um, it's called short. Is it short pieces for short films? It's basically just a collection of music from short films that I've done recently, and there's kind of something on that that means a great deal to me, which is from a film called Lia Tupuanga. Um, it's a really beautiful film that was at Sundance earlier this year, and I love it because it's about someone reconnecting with their culture and going on a journey to rediscover their roots essentially. And why I like it is because to sort of score a film like that or score a story like that, um, the challenge was how to acknowledge this person shifting and slowly making their way into finding their roots.
Mm.
And this woman is from a country called Tonga.
Mm.
And Tonga is an island in the South Pacific, much like New Zealand, except much warmer. And there's an instrument in the Tongan culture called the fangu fangu, and the fangu fangu is a nose flute, and it's the oldest instrument in the Tongan canon, and it's this really soft, undulating sound. So basically, I recorded one of those, and I sort of processed it to sort of make it kind of bury it in a mist of sort of sonic processes, and slowly through the film sort of the processes come off and you hear the sound clearer and clearer. It becomes this clarion, this sonic kind of beacon, this lighthouse that calls her um, to her culture. Sort of guides her. Yeah, so for sentimental reasons, I really liked working on that, and yeah, it's very different to the War of the Rohirrim, but
Sure,
I
but that's
enjoyed.
what it's all about. Great to hear that recommendation, and I will of course pass it along to my viewers. They might not be a lot, but
It's
perhaps
all good, man. And it's so nice to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And I know you didn't have much time to prepare, and I'm so deeply impressed with your questions and what you put to me and the stuff that you've figured out. So I think you're doing great work, and it's a real privilege to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Well, that feeling is entirely mutual, and if the occasion would arise for you to return to Middle Earth again in the future, I would keep my bets for you.
Thank you so much. I hope we speak again, and have a
Sure.
great Christmas and New Year.
Same to you.
And also to all of you, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.